you very much. Thanks to David and the team for inviting me to read here. It's just a wonderful afternoon we're having, and it's lovely to be reading with Victoria and Sasha as well. Am I audible? So I'm going to read mostly from Oak, but I'll read a couple of other poems first, both about creatures. Mr. Dead Fox. Laid out on the road like a fox diagram, 1 foot en pointe, he's a dancer stopped mid-pirouette. Poor brown fox, in his shame of being suddenly dead. What matters are the details, the slim, suave nose lifting towards a far field where the grasses wave and swish like water or like hair. The long drawn-out back and the stylish brush like Isadora Duncan's upheld scarf. Something absurd and beautiful to blame. With one ear pinned to the tarmac, he must be listening for what happens next, which is only far off rumbles and roars, the odd car radio fanfare. Imagine all the drivers who must have so carefully steered around the bright orange courts, making a short noise, such as a whistle or a tut. I'm not a translator, but sometimes I try and translate French poems, usually when I can't think of a poem of my own to write. There's a famous poem by Baudelaire called Les Hiboux, the Owls, and spent a long time trying to translate it, and ended up with lots of different versions of each line, which I'm sure is a common dilemma, and I couldn't decide which were the best versions, so I thought I'd put them all into a prose poem. So I have a rather rambling version of Baudelaire's Les Hiboux. It's called Untranslatable Owls. Strange as gods, the owls line up in the dark of the yews. The owls stand in the black yews like alien saints. Their red eyes flicker, their red eyes dart around. They think deeply, they are meditating. They'll be still until it's dusk and the shadows are long. They will wait for dusk without moving. Oh, melancholy is the hour when the sun goes down. Oh, dismal the shadows. Why not be as an owl and turn your back on the world? The sage must learn from the owls to shun the world's tumult. If you are wise, you'll run away from the world and all its mad mayhem. Chasing after every passing shadow will get you nowhere. Or indulging every whim like a drunken, crazy person will get you only melancholy, dismal. So I'm going to read, as I said, mostly from Oak, which is a book-length poem about the life of an oak tree. And it took somebody else to point out to me that I wrote this while I was living in a house called Oak View. And then I remembered or realised that Oak View didn't have a view of an oak. There was no oak tree anywhere near. So maybe there's something in that. Maybe that's why I wrote the poem. I don't know. The book is divided into 7 parts, and what I did was to retrofit the 7 ages of man to the life of an oak tree. So we start with the infant and we end up with the old man, and spoiler alert, I'm afraid the tree does die at the end. So I'm going to read a few of those sections, and I should also mention that each section is prefaced by a sort of chorus, a different voice speaking from somewhere else. I'm not quite sure who the voice belongs to. It could be Mother Earth or somebody else entirely. 1. The infant. This is not chaos, but a small change in our green midst, which shall not wreak havoc, nor shall it bring down curses or disaster, nor cause the seasons to go backwards, nor cause the weathers to upend. This is not chaos, but a small change, a foot in the field's low ebb. Such things are their own happening, and may not be our concern, we being the ones who were here first, and are therefore disposed to take the long view. This is not a moment for foretelling a magnificent woe, but for speaking of a small difference in our bright green midst, which may well come to something. And so we say, once upon a time. After a masked year, an inkling, like the thought of a thought. Far from the green skirts of the wood, an escapee acorn can't contain itself, lacking something that's upwards and something that's downwards, so neither knows what is lacked. They'll know when they get to it. No need for this broken old suitcase, which has been stepped out of like a magician's box is stepped out of. Something is moving up through the dark and down through the dark with a creaking you wouldn't believe how loud. Surely it must hurt. Tiny, white, wavering frond, tiny, quivering foot. It's tempting to ask, what if wind had not rattled so hard at the tree? Jay had not been called away across the field. Rain had not softened the blows. Earth had not agreed to pocket this one for keeps. Tiny, white, wavering frond, tiny, quivering foot. Wend your way lightwards, wend your way darkwards. Cranesbill, orchid, clover, sorrel, plantain, daisy, thistle, knapweed, dock. You can barely see an oakling amid a meadow's fruitless waving, the quiet one getting on without a fuss, like the kid in the corner who's good at maths. Birdsfoot trefoil, a little yellow purse, not much of a companion. And doesn't it make you sad, the flowers and trees left out in the dark, the meadow grey under the moon like a bleached reef, but very much not dead. In fact, fending for itself like the clean white owl brushing across the grasses. Shh, shh, shh. A sapling, meaning one who's young, slender as a greyhound. The trunk of a sapling is easily broken under this or that thoughtless heel, or can be snapped off in jaws. A sapling isn't altogether sure, therefore keeps it simple. If in doubt, put everything into up. The schoolboy. It is not for us to read out loud from the book of the future, but remember we are not stones. We have a mother's arms made for sorrow, a mother's mouth for speaking into the ear of one who will not care to listen when we mention how a certain hardness must be grown and henceforth worn like a fine suit, equal to rude weathers and to kindly weathers. Think of the throes of fortune or luck which cause one to be trodden down and one to muster itself and set foot, to take hold in the world. Oh, think what must be garnered, what must be held in abeyance. A schoolboy hates rules, but here are the rules of ramification. Trunk begets branch, and branch begets twig, and twig begets twig begets twig. And each remembers the angle that's needed to share out the wind. If this sounds like a lesson in drawing, it's not. And then there's the business of twisting and kinking to wriggle to where there's room for a new one. Contortions by no means elegant, but all the same smart. Things to crow about. More leaves oddling forth, the manner in which they flutter, a resolve in the inner woody cells, and underneath the makings of more than a toehold, the makings of making a stand, a sturdiness like a trumpet sounding after the strings. To flourish, meaning to flower, to grow undaunted, able to seal up a trouble and make of it a relic, like a socket without an eye in it. If someone comes later and traces the shape of the notch or nick with a finger, the oak will remember a vague, far-off pain, but never the truth of the cut to the quick. The pantaloon, that's a merchant. And there must always be money, which is ugly and leaves its stink on our fingers. We would rather not speak of it, the way it flows on like a river. For money is not everything, and money is no object, but an idea, and cannot be hidden away in a wardrobe or under floorboards. Still, we would rather not speak of it, for it dirties the tongue, and trouble is never far away from money. What is accrued must be guarded, which is a great woe. And because there must always be money, we will hide our faces in the books of our hands and fall into silence. A masked year is like when an orchestra suddenly plays fortissimo. You have to cover your ears for the splendour, the way the brass gets right inside your chest and makes a hollow doll of you. An oak puts everything into 50,000 little cups, each home to a beautiful pea-green nut. A fruiting oak is like an outburst of words. You might say lyric. A masked year takes it out of an oak, and to show for it only a few little ones, carried off and planted by a loud bird with tweezers for a beak. The rest just left lying about, food for thought, the waste of it. Old man, enough is never enough. Old tree, you can stop. The old man. And this is the seventh part, which is the last and most strange. A number that has a limping quality and is full of echoes and marvellous corridors. A number not worn away by maths, but polished into lastingness. 7 tells us something will happen that we have not foreseen. And because we are close to an ending, we must warn you to expect anything. For 7 is the number of the angels and trumpets, and also of the final thunders. These days, the oak holds close to its heart a nest of bats, the birds long gone, and finds comfort in the scuffly scratchings, the upside-down stretchings and bare-faced bickerings. The oak is not yet dead, but is beset by gushes of fern and rain's deep scourings, and by beefsteak fungus like a drooping orange tutu, memory of dancing. The oak is like a hot compost from which this or that living thing might crawl or spring or flap. You might say the oak is dying of kindness. An oak of great age has gravitas, like a Baroque cathedral, and must be painted by a famous artist at dawn and noon, and in the afternoon, and at dusk. Or chips of bark must be taken from it as souvenirs, or it must be knocked on for luck, or it must be crawled into by two small boys, making spooky noises, so the oak appears to be itself a howling ghost. This is the time for a very old oak to look back to its heyday of flexing in the wind, of tossing birds up into the air and catching them again, of flourishing greenly and of the great meadow blowing, cheery heads of knapweed, cranesbill, thistle, of the lovely washing rain, of the last leaves coppering and dropping, making a sound like cutlery. Easy then to be alive, and oh, so very ordinary. At last, the oak must give up its ghost, must crumble and flake and splinter and creak, until with a roar it is brought to its knees, a great slumping, as when a poacher brings down a rhino. The oak will suddenly find itself lonely and look up at the sky, at the birds swiftly passing, and will hunker down like a hare to her fawn. And light will mean nothing, and air will mean nothing, and rain will mean nothing, and an oak must think nothing, and an oak must feel nothing, but a long vanishment into the earth. I'm going to finish just with a couple of poems. One that's been requested by Edmund Prestwich. It's not very often that one gets a request, so how could I say no? And it's wonderful to be part of this afternoon in which music and poetry are so beautifully sort of woven together, because to my mind they can't really be separated. And this is a poem about a piece of music from a sequence of poems that I wrote about the composer Gerald Finzi. It's called On Chosen Hill. And it's inspired by Finzi's Nocturne for Orchestra in C-sharp minor. On Chosen Hill. Because this is the key of moonlight and lamentation, the cellos will speak up first, describing a hill in darkness on the last night of the year. There's no escaping it. The future must be taken like a medicine. And soon there will be no ploughed fields through the kitchen window on which to set your thoughts. All you want is a tune to carry you across, loud brass and plodding thuds from a drum to help you walk back down the hill to London. A year has gone by since you went up and saw one long, low note moving over the face of the deep. Finish with a tree poem, but something that's slightly more seasonally appropriate. It's also very new. Loveliest of trees. Because it's blossom time, I turn my mind to the cherry in your long-lost London garden. Every year it turned up like a sudden caller, bearing scent and flowers in its leafless arms. It stood there in its own exact simplicity, without poetry or music, unashamedly complete. It was far too beautiful and far too pink, and the April that you died, it didn't have the grace to weep. That cherry tree is not a symbol or a sign. It exists now as a memory that comes in spring, and if it has a meaning, it's as a lovely thing I'll not forget, nor hope to see again. Thank you very much for listening.